This court's now in session. Please be seated.
All right, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, including Ms. Clancy and including the 18 jurors.
All right. All right. Counsel?
Thank you. Dr. Brower, before we broke, we mentioned the term therapeutic concentration. You familiar with that term?
Correct.
What does that mean?
It's the typical concentration that one would achieve when they're taking the medication or drug as indicated by their prescriber.
And are you familiar with toxic concentrations or suicidal concentrations?
I am.
And what does that mean?
Those are concentrations that could lead to adverse events and potentially death.
Now, in relation to the 4 substances that were tested at the NMS laboratory, you identified the levels for each of the 4 substances. Were any of those concentration levels considered within therapeutic concentration?
It would all be in what I would say a therapeutic concentration, except maybe the quetiapine, which is slightly elevated.
Okay. And in your experience as a forensic toxicologist, have you had the occasion to review cases, post-mortem cases in which suicide was a mechanism of death where the person consumed medication?
Absolutely, yes.
And so that level of the quetiapine at the 800 nanograms per milliliter, would that have been in that toxic or suicidal level?
No, ma'am.
Would you generally expect to see that significantly greater in a suicide case?
Typically, quetiapines in suicide cases might be in the, close to 10,000 nanograms per milliliter. Usually people take handfuls of pills when they're trying to harm themselves and take their own life, and this is not consistent with that.
Now, are you also familiar in your training and experience with the class of drugs called benzodiazepines?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have the occasion to interpret data as it pertains to concentration levels for those?
Every single day.
And as far as the substances diazepam, noradiazepam, oxazepam, temazepam, lorazepam, you're familiar with those?
I am.
And it's fair to say noradiazepam, oxazepam, temazepam, those are all metabolites of diazepam?
Typically, yes, ma'am.
And what's the common name for diazepam?
Valium.
Okay. If I show you what's been marked as Exhibit 183 already. Can you see that on the screen beside you?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Right there.
Can you see the levels?
They're all blurry.
Yep, hold on one second. There you go.
My eyesight's not great too, so
Okay, so
That's perfect.
That's the best I can do with the autofocus.
don't touch it.
Anything about the levels that you observed here regarding those substances, those benzodiazepines, that tell you that they're outside therapeutic concentration levels?
The diazepam and the nordiazepam, oxazepam, and temazepam metabolites, the diazepam looks to be sub-therapeutic, meaning lower than what is typically expected from a therapeutic dose. Most therapeutic doses of diazepam, which is an anxiolytic drug or an anti-anxiety drug, are typically 200, 250 thereabouts nanogram per milliliter. The lorazepam, depending upon the dose, could be a therapeutic concentration, if not maybe a little bit lower than expected.
Okay, thank you. Now, when you're reviewing these cases as the reporting forensic toxicologist, are there limitations on what you can say about the effects of these types of medications?
We can speak as to the general effects that drugs can have on the general population, but we try to restrict ourselves from saying with absolute certainty that a drug will have this effect on this specific person, because we just aren't there to witness their behavior
Okay, so that was kind of the follow-up. So
I'm sorry.
What are the things that are the unknowns for you when you're just looking at data?
When we say that we can't do toxicology in a vacuum. You can't know everything about the case just by looking at numbers on the toxicology report and drugs on a toxicology report. You need other information to have an informed opinion. In the post-mortem world, that would be the investigation itself, the history of the case, the scene findings, interviews with, families and friends of the decedent. As well as autopsy findings as well. In a case like this where it's not a decedent and the person is alive, you still need to know some facts of the case, some sort of history of the case, like what happened. So just numbers on a page, you can just make very generalized types of opinions, such as that looks to be therapeutic, it looks to be high, it looks to be low, and then again, just the general effects on the drugs on people.
And in this particular instance, you were not provided any further information about the case or the investigation in order to make any more opinions about effects.
I knew nothing about this case until we spoke, I think it was probably a few weeks ago.
And as far as the information available to you, you only had the data from the specimen that was tested, correct?
That is correct. Just these 4 drugs that were requested to be tested for.
And as far as the drugs, the 4 drugs that were tested by your lab, what are the general characteristics of some of those drugs?
So these are generally antidepressants and antipsychotic medications. So if somebody had, the lamotrigine, if somebody has, say, bipolar disorder, like wild mood swings, depressive episodes or psychotic episodes, these drugs could be prescribed. They also have depressant effects, so they could make people become, lethargic or sleepy.
Okay. And would any of the combination of these drugs cause a person to stop breathing?
It's possible, especially the mirtazapine, quetiapine, the trazodone, and then the 2 other benzodiazepines. Those are all central nervous system depressants, so they could, in large combinations or large concentrations and in combination with each other, cause central nervous system depression, which could reduce people's respiration rates.
But in the levels that you observed in the testing that your lab did, as well as what I just showed you from Exhibit 183, is there anything about those concentration levels that would give you a sense that the person could have stopped breathing as a result of these?
Not necessarily, but if I had the information that, a patient presented to an emergency department and they had labored breathing and weren't breathing adequately, and I had this information, then you could probably tie all that together. But without that extra information, then generally no.
Based on the levels alone, you can't give any sort of opinion?
I would like to not.
Okay. And finally, are you familiar with the drug Narcan?
I am.
And what kind of effect does the drug Narcan have on a person who has consumed these drugs, if any?
Just these drugs that we've talked about here today?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay. Can you explain to us why it is that Narcan wouldn't have an effect?
Narcan is an opioid overdose reversal agent. It is an opioid antagonist. So it binds to the opioid receptors. So it doesn't allow other opioids like, say, fentanyl or oxycodone to bind to those receptors to have, to exert its effects. So it only works on opioids. None of these drugs work on the opioid receptors, so Narcan would have no effect whatsoever on these drugs.
Okay, thank you.